Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining my live stream this evening. Tonight, I am joined by David O'Reilly. Would you like to introduce yourself? But because you've been on before, so
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Josh. I got the technical side of things off today, and it's gone very smoothly. I'm glad to be back with you. We've had a good few chats, and I enjoy, particularly why I enjoy talking to you, is because it's a intergenerational conversation. So I think that's important. I'm a grandfather myself now, so who am I? I'm David O'Reilly, Dave the Chariot. I suppose, best known for reproducing the uh, Irish style of chariots, or the Cuchulainn style of chariot, the Aheny High Cross chariot, and that was really my first foray into public life, and in the realm of culture, and that has its own story in itself. I'm married 30 years to Valerie. She's a Kilkenny girl. I'm immigrant Irish, I suppose, in that I was born in Scotland and spent most of my childhood in the UK, and returned to my family would be from Kildare and Fermanagh, and I live in Galway, and I have lived in Galway for since 1990, and that would be, I mean, the longest I'd ever lived anywhere before that was 3 years. So I feel like I've lived in Galway forever, but I'm still blowing, and I'm not a local, and I'm quite happy with my own history and journey getting here. I uh, ran for the Dáil as a nationalist twice, once back in 2020 as an independent, and this time with the Irish People. I'm secretary of the Irish People too. I suppose I led my life. I found my faith when I was 23, and that really set me up for a great life. And it's accumulated benefits and blessings to me over that period of time. So that's broadly who I am. I'm, and we'll talk more, Josh, about these things.
yeah. So what are your chariots like? Like the Cuchulainn chariots you mentioned. What are they like?
Well, good question. I like to draw a distinction between what everybody understands to be a Roman racing chariot. So Ben Hur, that's the imagery people have in their heads about chariots. Whereas the Irish chariots were very different. Um, and some people are a little bit disappointed because we've got an awe of classical culture. And when the Irish chariots don't look like Roman racing chariots, people feel, oh, well, they must be a bit crapper then. But actually, Romans just race with chariots, whereas the Gauls, the Gaels, the Celts used chariots in war. They were a status symbol. So they were a very different kind of chariot for a very different use. And the the credit due to the Irish chariots or the Celtic chariots is that they look very much like modern horse-drawn vehicles. So the Celtic chariot is the successful design. It has big wheels, 4 foot high, unlike the little round wheels on the Roman racing chariots. You sit on them instead of stand on them. It's much more solid. Now, the warrior does stand. It's a two-man team. The driver, I mean, this is going from Boudicca right up to the age of the high crosses. It's always the same. You've got a charioteer in the Cuchulainn tales. Leg was Cuchulainn's charioteer. Oran was St. Patrick's charioteer. So you have the nobleman and you have the charioteer who sits and drives the horses, and the noble person stands up on the chariot. So it's very imposing, and there's a great height to it. But that's broadly speaking what the Irish chariots look like. They're drawn by two horses. There is evidence that sometimes they may have been drawn by four in Ireland, but generally it's a two-horse chariot, and that's what they look like, Josh. Oh, I've lost you, Josh. I don't know why I can't hear you.
Oh, my mic was off. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, it's you this time, not me.
Yeah.
No, I've heard everything you said up to now, so carry on.
Yeah. So you said that you moved here in the 1990s.
Yeah, in 1990, I was in my early 20s.
Well,
And
what type of changes did you see in Irish society?
there was a big change because Ireland was, in a good way, it hadn't been exposed to what I had been exposed to in the UK. So my cousins would have been would have known me as, you know, we were a little bit more spoiled. We didn't have to work as much. We were more fashionable and all those kind of things. So our cousins who stayed back here had a different kind of a life. They didn't get so much to go off, and you know, they were more tied to their family, less to pop culture. They didn't have as much access to pop culture, and so when I came back, you know, girls were still fairly chaste. You know, I would say that about half of the girls got married as virgins, you know, back in the 1990s. You know, it wasn't the sex, drugs, and rock and roll life that some people back here would have envied us in the UK for having. There was more of a social gaze. The parents and grandparents had expectations that that people had to live up to, because you remember, as an immigrant's child, I didn't have any family in the UK. All my family were back here, so you know, I was very much free from any responsibilities to anybody but my two parents. Whereas if you were growing up in Ireland, the most likely situation is that you've got a good number of cousins, second cousins, and a lot of relatives in the area, and you're responsible to them. They have a lot more say over your life, and so that would have been the social situation that most people would have been in. It would be much more community orientated and much more tied to community. I mean, for example, what other kind of things would have been? Opportunities were far less. For example, driving a car would have been quite easy over in the UK. You'd pick a car up for 50, 90 quid back in the days, and you'd insure it for 100. Whereas when I came back, I had a van, and I went to insure it for the first time in the Republic, and the van cost, over in the UK, it cost me 125 pounds. Here it cost me exactly 10 times as much. So it was 1,250 euros, or 50 pounds, Irish pounds, to drive. So, you know, most families, most rural families had one car and a tractor. You would have seen the wife pushing a pram up to the shop, and the cars people had, of course, weren't. There was no NCT, and so people had advantages here in that they were asset rich in terms of a lot of people had were coming from a farm, or houses were very cheap at the time. I mean, a house would have been about 10,000 pounds to buy. A day's work would have been about 20 or 25 pounds for a day's work. So I think houses would have probably been a little bit more accessible, but people were asset rich in that they had access to land, and housing wasn't so much of an issue, but they were cash poor, and that was one of the things here. I mean, there was no pornography in the shops, which there was in the UK, and so that's the broad sense of Ireland. Very much Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. When I voted for the first time, I think there was two Fianna Fáiles and two Fine Gaelers in East Galway, and my memory of it was that was pretty much it,
Yeah, like you say at the start of your point that like Ireland wasn't really exposed like to the sexual revolution like the UK was, because Ireland had a very strong like Christian foundation, whereas the UK hasn't. Like they threw out Christianity in 1600s, whereas we has held on to it. So I think that like the Catholic faith has um was the reason why Ireland was shielded for so long from um the sex revolution and sex and drugs, and if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I think that the Irish have changed very quickly. Um, you're starting to meet young teenagers who don't know the Our Father and the Hail Mary. That would have been, these are Irish teenagers. That would have been unthinkable back in the day. And I think because of Ireland's, I, I think communities sometimes, and you see this often with strong communities who have been overwhelmed by cultural revolutions, that they actually become very broken by it. If you look at, for example, I mean, the classic thing would be the Native Americans, but you also see it with the Aboriginals, you see it with travelers as well, is that um, is that when they do start breaking the taboos around drugs, very quickly they go from a society where there is no addiction and no suicide to a society where there's a huge amount of addiction and suicide. And you compare it to, say, America or UK, where the sexual revolution started, and it's not as severe over there. I don't think that's just anecdotally. I think that another point I'd make is innocence is a strength, and what you're not exposed to doesn't damage you. So you can have very healthy communities and families that have never been exposed to or have resisted strongly these influences. I mean, I think of, there's lots of Catholic families, there's lots of Christian families where, I mean, take, for example, the Burkes. I know they're not Catholic, but, you can see there a family that has been sheltered from the sexual revolution by a very strong family morality. And that has been a strength to them. They haven't been exposed, they haven't been broken, they haven't been hurt, they haven't been betrayed, they haven't been had their head spin spun. They don't come across as people who've been suffering from depression and all those kind of things. So, innocence can be a massive strength to young people, and I think that Ireland had that innocence and that strength back. Not so much certainly in the 70s anyway. Now the problem with Ireland was you had emigration, so people were always going over to the UK and getting exposed to the degeneracy over there, and then coming back here. Now it wasn't all degeneracy; some of it was freedom. For my mother, who left Kildare and went nursing in the UK, there was a huge amount of freedom for her. But the thing is, when you're alone in the UK with a bunch of other girls, you haven't got the kind of advice, direction, and shepherding that you would have in a local community. I would say that back in the 50s, the nuns and the priests were still looking after the Irish emigrants in the UK, keeping them connected to their churches, involved in their parishes, and there was a sense of protection in that. But when you lose all those things, when you reject the values which have created strength in our society, when you let go of them one by one, you find you're very exposed, and that has happened over a period of time to the Irish communities over in the UK, but also, and they've become more fragmented. The strength of those communities has been dissipated, but also for the communities back here, once they've abandoned that shelter, they're very much exposed. And we're seeing the ravages of it in Ireland at the moment. A loss of purpose, a loss of vision for their lives, a lack of accepting doctrines like the climate doctrine, which says you're a scourge on the planet, and you don't deserve anything for yourself. And these are the kind of negative internal voices which have taken over. Now, some people would say that, the Catholic Church gave you a negative voice, where accusing you of sin and all these kind of things. But actually, the Catholic Church also said God loves you. The Catholic Church also said Jesus is the savior of the world. It doesn't need saving. It's already been saved. So, I believe Christianity is like this, that there are boundaries on either side. So, there were acceptable limits in terms of freedom and in terms of correction. And the good shepherding of a culture or people is to keep people within boundaries, to prevent them from being hurt by freedom, and to help them from being hurt by over restriction. So, you've lost all those kind of things, and now we're in a free fall. Paganism, New Ageism, climate, atheism, agnosticism hasn't really built a culture in Ireland to replace the Catholic culture, and the expectations, the patterns of behaviors, the cultures, the sense of vision and purpose for a nation. So we're kind of a bit lost now. And I think that that's both yourself and myself see Ireland is a bit lost, whereas we may not feel that about ourselves. I mean, I don't feel I'm lost. I'm very happy with my sense of purpose and vision for my life. I know exactly what my purpose is in life and what I'm supposed to be doing. and that has grown over my years. Do you feel that sense of purposefulness as a Catholic, Joshua?
Like, what do you mean by
I
that
mean,
question? Sorry, I don't.
that is. Um, do you feel that you have that your life has a purpose as a Catholic?
Yes,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
Like, I think society today, um, I think society, I think the society we have today is a consequence of rejecting God. Like, society is in a mess because nobody prays anymore. That's what Saint Padre Pio said. Like, when he died in the 60s, he said um, nobody's praying, which is why society is falling apart. And I think um, that's why we're in this mess today. And I think the antidote to the mess we are in today is going back to by getting on our knees again and worshiping and worshiping God again, that like we did, say, when Christianity came here in the 5th century up until the 1980s and 90s.
Yeah, there's a. I think St. Paul. I can't remember who he was speaking to, or was it Jesus, um, who said, "When iniquity abounds, the love of many grow cold." You know, when iniquity abounds, the love of many will grow cold, and that is the case. That's the case for me too, because um, a fire is made bright by lots of coals being together. And if you're burning and I'm burning and somebody else is burning, we're all burning together. We make a big flame and a big fire. Whereas when we're more isolated, um, it's harder to generate um, I suppose, the conviction. Um, you know, um, I would be also uh, surrounded or swimming in a society that doesn't pray, that doesn't celebrate prayer. People don't. You don't come across people blessing themselves much or these kind of things, and for that reason, my life would my prayer life would suffer. I'm not a great prayer myself because we have to rebuild our Christian communities and our Christian behavior. We have to support this in one another. We're very much coming from a um, from a Christ from we're people who, well, I'm a person who at one point abandoned my faith, went looking for something else, um, felt the despair of that, and returned to my faith. So, I'm still coming back to Christ, back to Christianity in a sense. Even though I suppose I I I, I I turned my life towards Christ about 1987, 88. That's a very long time ago. And the great thing is it was a blessing for me then, in that my mental health improved a lot. Um, I hadn't smoked a joint since that time. My children have never seen me stagger, never seen me drunk. Um, and I suppose I met my wife, who is a woman of great faith, um, probably around 8 years later, and I've had a family who shares my values and my belief. Um, so I have 4 children. We had 2 foster children, and just this week, my eldest daughter had our first grandchild. So my faith has been an antidote to the a falling society. So whereas birth rates are falling, my birth rate isn't falling. Where where we're surrounded by addiction um, and mental health issues. You know, we don't. Yes, we struggle with some of those things. Yes, the kids have to grow up and they have to be part of that culture and escape from it. Each of my children have had to work out some kind of a disentanglement from the worst of degeneracy. And I have to say, I'm delighted with them. They don't all go to church, go to my church every week. In fact, none of them go to my church. I go to the Latin Mass every week. Well, not every week, but I sometimes go to the local parish church here. And the rest of the time, I'd be going to the Latin Mass in Galway with Christ the King. And but my kids all go to church on a Sunday, except for the youngest one. In fact, he's working out at the moment. But my older ones have all uh, dabbled with the the permissive society that Ireland is now. Worked out that it's damaging or it's hurt them in some way, and have retreated from it. And now I'm seeing them. Um, you know, they're in a good place. You know, they're working, they're driving a car, they're you know, they're going to church. I'm happy when if my kids have, especially the lads, if they have a car, a job, and a girlfriend, things normally go fairly well. You know, from that point, I do feel that this generation and my own children as well need to focus more on the target of these relationships. So when they meet a girlfriend, do they understand that this is headed for marriage or not headed for marriage? And you know, whereas there is an acceptable dating process, when things firm up, if the kids, if the youth have three things, which is a spark, an attraction, they're proud of the other person. If they have a way of going together, that their lives are capable um, of taking the same path, and they have a sense of destiny, that the Holy Spirit is in this, then they shouldn't hang around. They should just go for it. And you know, I think that this is something which is lacking in our modern society, is that the youth, when they have a lot of encounters with partners or you know, dates, or you know, whatever, a lot of male female encounters, but a lot of them are, most of them are purposelessness. There's a purposelessness to them. They don't know what the target is. They don't know why they're doing this. What is the destination of this? And the destination is marriage, you know, and that's what why we're not seeing. I know there's a housing crisis. I know there's all kinds of things, but that's one of the main reasons why we're not seeing people, families forming, you know.
Yeah, because my generation has this idea of dating. Like they don't understand dating properly. It's like they would date somebody, but the relationship only lasts about a few weeks, and then they have broken hearts afterwards. And it's like in the Catholic lifestyle, you won't have broken hearts because you truly understand what dating is in the Catholic sense. And you'll find, like, in the if you're a Catholic, you'll find, if you're a Christian, you'll find um the right spouse for you, if you get what I mean. Like God provides you with, I mean, a loyal spouse if your calling is to marriage.
That's true. I mean, I know that I have the best woman that for myself. You know, there is a destiny to myself and my own and Valerie's marriage. Um, it's been difficult all the same because, of course, we are willful and demanding, and um, you know, we are always fighting to establish rights and demands and those kind of things. So it is a struggle too. It stops feeling like love at times, but that's why marriage is a commitment. You know, the love is there, the attraction is there, particularly I think to get young couples through the early stages. The fact that they're young, strong, handsome, and beautiful makes a huge difference. You know, and but when those feelings um, uh, are not number one, and it happens. It'll happen to everyone. It's the commitment of marriage. You know, it's you've made a vow. You have taken an oath, and this is something which people is very appealing, I think, to young people, but something which they're very unfamiliar with, which is this idea of doing something really hard, taking on a challenge like that, you know, making an oath to a woman, you know, and saying, I'll, I have said that I'm going to be there and I will, no matter what. And that is stronger than love, the feeling of love, you know. Now it is love in many ways, and the love grows, the love is a result of that. But the the marriage is a commitment in more than anything else. And it's not just a commitment to your wife, it's a commitment to your family, it's a commitment to your children. That, like I said, your children, that you're going to be a as good a father as you can be to them. And that's not easy. It's easy if you, like myself, uh, gave up sex, drugs, and rock and roll when I was 23 and got married when I was 30. So I had 7 years to clean my act up. And, so by the time I was getting married, I had a lot of the attitude that I needed to make it work. But a relationship with a child is, it goes all over the place. And then they're exposed. They grow up and become teenagers. They challenge you, and for me, as a child who was, slapped, and I'm old enough that we were still caned at school, So, and my kids said to me, "Why did you let them cane you?" It's a little bit mad when you think of it like that. You went in, you were told you'd broken so much, so many rules. Hold your knees. I'm gonna thrash you with a stick, and but we submit to that, and sometimes you would be left with your underpants stuck to your arse with blood, which happened to me once. So, when you're reared with an attitude that, transgressions should be met with aggression and violence, it's quite hard to adjust to this environment where, if you attack your child, it's a crime, So I had to find a different way of parenting, and I made that transition very quite successfully, in my own opinion. Probably not in everybody else's, but I'm glad that I found a way of parenting without physical conflict, without the physicality. The oldest child probably got a little bit more. He was slapped. The youngest one, we did a lot more talking. There are confrontations, but I will say this: I found that children that are reared with aggression behave aggressively, and yes, it's good to be able to be aggressive when the time is necessary, and children that are slapped and those kind of things are much more comfortable with aggression. But the younger lad does his boxing and the rest of it, so it's more controlled. And what I found with kids was that they really responded to approval. They want to know that mommy thinks their little girl is great. That is so important. A parent's approval to a child is much more motivating than, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to hit. I'm going to physically push you around. So I think a lot of people say, well, the youth are very out of control now. I think they're out of control for a number of reasons. They're not all out of control. Maybe it's a world where things are a lot softer. It's a snowflake culture, as they say. But I do think there's a lot of good in the last few years. I think in terms of freedom and in terms of access to a quality of life with the technology and all those kind of things, it is a good life for people now. The problem is we're locked into an economy where housing is a commodity. That's probably one of our biggest problems at the moment, and as well as the immigration, which is an issue too.
Yeah, and like you said about like how young people today are out of control. Like I think it's because like their parents are like that. I mean, I think you made that point as well, and like I think that if a child was raised with like say strict Catholic parents, and I think that a child will be raised in that standard, and when he becomes, or when he or she has kids of their own, she'll do the same thing. But you said you go to a Latin
Yeah,
mass once a week. I go as well. It's a very. I like that. I like the. I think it's the reverence that is attracting lots of people to it, and I just think that it's more angelic and it's very sacred, and I think it's bringing lots of people to the church.
I think you're right. That was what I liked about it, because I suppose when I returned to my faith, I returned as an evangelical. So even though it was great for teaching the Bible, I found the more and more as time went on, that it was really um, it was becoming more and more about the Christians' feelings, how they feel, and the faith is not about my feelings. And what I love about the Latin Mass is there's no talking. It's you're not listening to someone talk about how they feel and what they did and this and that. You're just seeing a ritual, and the ritual says um, tells a story without words. I understand the ritual, and um, in the end, this is to do with life over death. This is to do with hope. It's to do with sacrifice, and it's to do with simple core issues, and that's comforting. Um, you can trivialize these things by over talking them. And the ritual of the mass became very significant to me and profound, and I enjoy the peace of having a clear head for the whole thing. People don't irritate me during the mass. Now, I will say the message of the gospel is a comforting thing in all the denominations, and I know a lot of Catholics would disagree with me on that. So it's always comforting, but I find that the mass, it's what I was reared with. I mean, I was reared in Catholic schools, even though I was reared in the UK. It was very much a monastic environment. You know, we were taught by monks. We went. I was an altar boy. The priest. I was over there in Worcestershire to the school I used to go to, and I went into the old church, and that church was really important to me. I have so many memories of that church, and there at the entrance of the church was a grave, and it was Father Lacey from I think it was Drumlish in County Leitrim, and you know, that was a profound thing. So yeah, I remember the Latin Mass. I remember singing. We learned to sing really well. We were taught so well to sing as a choir, and those things I don't think anybody experiences anymore. My first lesson in class was Latin. You know, we were only what primary school kids, and so we were very much reared in a Catholic environment. Um, you know, Catholicism is more than an Irish thing, and even though the Irish in the UK were very much the Catholic Church, there was a few English Catholics over there still, but more, I would say, at least half of the parishioners would have been Irish, and most of the priests would have had some kind of Irish background. So it was what I was reared with, and it's comforting to me, all those things, to be doing them again. And, you know, I don't need an amazing message. You know, I am satisfied with the familiarity of the ritual and of an encounter with God. That's what I go there to do, to reconnect to God there, and I do, and that's what is important. The other thing, Josh, which I found really important about the Latin Mass, is the community of people. The evangelicals really got suckered by COVID. They failed to recognize the agenda at play there. That there is, this is a fallen world. According to the Bible, the prince of this world is the devil, and we are under the shadow of death all our lives. The world is one where we eat other animals. You know, it's a fallen world in a way. You know, none of these things are fair, that we should face our mortality and die. You know, that the fox should eat the innocent rabbit who's just minding his own business and attacks no one. You know, this is a fallen world. There are questions of unanswered questions about it, and so, you know, we have to expect that our governments have a measure of corruption, venality, and evil to them, and that seemed to so many church groups, when they were told stop going to church, the government is in charge now. You know, there wasn't a recognition that, you know, this is a challenge to your obedience to God, you know, to meet every week. And most Christian Christian churches of all denominations, including Catholic denominations, including Catholic churches, failed to recognize anything sinister in all of that. But what I found was the the Latin Mass Christians, the 90% of them got it, and I feel part of a community that is faithful and obedient and willing to sacrifice. And that's important. I feel very comfortable with that. And that's the kind of fellowship of believers I want to be around, and, so the Latin Mass is a challenge to the I suppose the spirit of the age, and I want to be part of that challenge.
Exactly, yeah. So you also said to me before we went live that you wanted to talk about like politics as well and the nationalist movement. What do you want to say about?
I want to engage with you as a representative of the young people who understand the issues, but are not are having a variety of responses to the political challenge. I mean, the way I see it, Josh, is that politics is not the only way we challenge the what is, I suppose, the world, our governments, who are capable of being corrupt and leading us on a vision which is bringing us the wrong way. So politics is one of the ways. I mean, ultimately, nothing's going to change while we have this government in power. That's one of the realities that we have to face. Governments change by either they change their policies. I mean, the Fianna Fáil of the 1990s would never have accepted. I mean, I was looking back when Ireland joined the EU, or the EEC as it was called back then, that one of the big headlines, because I found the headlines when I was doing some work in a house, and you find these newspapers from years ago, and the headline was that non-nationals would be able to buy Irish land. That was a big deal, because I think there was, by the sounds of it, there was restrictions on foreign ownership of land. And so the Fianna Fáil of those days has changed its policies in response to the radical left. So now both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are pretty much essentially the radical left acts as boots on the ground for EU and secular government policy. And so whereas it has changed from, say, the 80s up to now, it can change. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael can change their policies back again. And that's one of the ways things change. Another thing is we come at it from a new angle. We create our own parties. It was what we've tried to do, which what I tried to do was very much part of the mechanics of the National Alliance to bring nationalist parties together to campaign. And my aim was our aim was to get 2% of the vote and put ourselves on the pitch in terms of the statutory entitlement to funding and those kind of things. Now we failed. The nationalist movement underperformed in the elections. The National Alliance got just shy of 1% of the vote. If everybody we had reached out to had come on board with a loose agreement, and if we'd got it past the Electoral Commission, which we didn't, we were thwarted, then we may have been in a very different position, where we would be getting the 200,000 or €250,000 funding that all the other parties get. And you can mount a political campaign without money. We're all broke after campaigning. Fianna Fáil candidates aren't. Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, even people for profit, they're not broke. We are, because how difficult do we want to make this for ourselves? And that's another question, which we'll park for now. But I did notice, I have noticed that the youth, their response to the political campaign has been more hardcore. So I'll just finish off, before I go back to that, I'll finish off a couple of things. I say that, you can challenge this through culture. If the culture changes, we can lead a cultural revolution through our values, through a rebirth of Christianity in Irish society, and the politicians will follow. The other thing we can do, which is what this podcast is all about, is creating narratives. Once we create a public discussion and people are talking about these things, it's a movement for change. It generates change. So these are very important. And I would say that culture is the most important. Narrative, what we're doing now, is the second most important, and politics is the third most important. But I think that it's important that everybody contribute to the politics. I think you can do two things at once. You can work at the narrative, you can work at spirituality, you can, even if you're not a Christian and you're working on the vibrations, or you're working on creating awareness, you can still vote. You can still support a political challenge. But a lot of people haven't made a contribution. Most of the nationalist-minded people are not contributing to a political campaign. And that's for a number of reasons. I mean, some people are deregistered. Some people are going, down the legal common law road. Some people believe in revolution, but there's no point in politics. But my attitude is, a contribution to a political movement, a political challenge, would be something that would be worth everybody's while doing. But Josh, I notice a lot of the youth respond different to. I'm a boomer. I'm the very last month, or the second last month of the boomers. I was born in November 64. So 65 is the next generation, whatever they're called. But I'm the much maligned boomers. We ruined everything for everybody, and we rent everybody these houses at extortionate rates. We have taken the free education and we've charged everybody else for it. We've taken the council houses and all the post-war freedoms, and we've lapped them up, worn them, and deprived the next generation of those things. So I would say that I probably would have fought. My life would have been a struggle against those things, against my generation. I would have gone against the grain. So I feel fairly guilt-free, because I can trace my opposition to the policies which have created the society where we have such a challenge for our young people. I've opposed those things all throughout my life. But what does concern me is that I see that the youth are becoming disillusioned with a lot of things. It's hard to get the youth to say, to put their trust in the political effort, to put their trust in the processes of the Irish Republic.
Because I say so many. I was at the protest yesterday, and I seen so many people my age there, and I think that's a good sign. But like I feel like as well by political parties, I think that like creating political parties is not the way, because we already have the National Party, Your Party, Ireland First, and I think and Clan Éireann. But I think that like there's too much of a divide between all the parties, if you get what I mean. Like I feel like everybody should come together in one party, but I think that like elections are rigged, so I don't think there's much point in elections. And like what do you think?
I think every election has um, some corruption. I think every election has a level of malpractice. My feeling is that the last election wasn't a whole lot worse than any other election. I really do think that we didn't get our act together as a nationalist movement. I mean, I spent a long time working on that, creating a platform where we could see. The Electoral Commission will give us another party every day, because they know that the government knows that the more parties we have, the more split we are, and the less it's when we try to come together that we had the problems. When we agreed to for the National Party, ourselves, the Irish people, Ireland First, and a number of independents all agreed to put one single candidate forward and to create a single target for the voter to vote for. The Electoral Commission found all kinds of reasons to not give us that, even though they'd given it for people before profit and the Socialist Party. They operate under a joint. They've come together to create a joint party, but they wouldn't do that for us. Even so, we only got 1% of the vote, a little less than that. We have to get our act together. I think it's coming together. I think you saw in that rally a move from the usual 5,000 to, tens of thousands, which was a great thing. I think what happened, what most people have tried to do, or the politics up till now has been something like this. What people have put their faith in is that we're going to put out a message, it's going to go viral, and everybody's going to support us. Everybody's going to hear what we're doing. Everybody's going to know that we're right, and they're all going to support us. That didn't happen. Just because we own Twitter, that our voice is probably, and because we've won all the arguments and the momentum is with us, doesn't mean people are going to go out and vote for us. They still have an emotional attachment to, like, take Newton Mount Kennedy. Now, it could be that it was rigged. I don't think it was. Newton Mount Kennedy, the locals lined up against the riot police, and they gave it a good push and a shove. They went home and they went and voted for Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and Sinn Féin. They didn't vote for nationalist candidates, and
But the reason, but the question is why are they voting for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and Sinn Féin when that they are the enemies of the Irish people? Like that kind of makes that's a contradiction. in way like protesting government but then voting for government candidates. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I find it really hard to believe. I mean, it sounds rigged to me because even Rylev, it's the same people getting elected again, even though there were different candidates on the table.
You're right. I mean, it's madness,
Like,
but yet you see this madness. I was at a community meeting in South Galway about the IPAS centres in a very woke town. It's the wokest town in South Galway. And myself, Alan Sweeney, and Dara Flaherty, we protested the arrival of IPS people back in 2020 or 2019, I think it was. And the hostility towards us was enormous. We were physically confronted. We were excluded. The government campaign, the ministers and the local councillors all joined together. The NGOs did their big refugees welcome message, and we were the bad people. You know, we were the excluded. We were excluded from the radio, even though the radio wanted us. The local radio wanted us on. When the minister and all of those guys arrived, there was no way. This was a narrative forming exercise, and they weren't going to have another route or art, you know. And now I went to that community meeting just a couple of weeks ago again because, you know, they are now getting 100 people going into the hotel, and these aren't going to be Ukrainians this time. And now the people have changed. They're saying there's no refugees welcome talk anymore. We need to protest, but mostly what I see is they have an emotional attachment to their local representatives. Their identity is bound up in Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, or Sinn Féin. They see themselves as those things, and they can't conceive that their local TD, when he's saying, or their local councillor, when he's saying, well, we haven't got the facilities, or, you know, the government said that they wouldn't do this. And you see a lot of councillors saying, I've taken this on, and they're full of sincerity, and some of them are just, they don't understand how this all works because they get elected so easy. They really don't have to understand the issues to get elected. And so they go in and they think that they can go up to Dublin to the head office and say, look, we have a problem here. But what I found with the local representatives was there was a woman called Anne Rabbit locally, and she used to go into these meetings. She used to say, well, it's government policy. You know, and she didn't say, well, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to try and stop this. I'm going to have a word in somebody's ear she just used to say, this is government policy. You know, these are our strategic partners. This is the program for government. This is what you voted for, and you're getting it, whether you like it or not. She used to actually say, she didn't put it like that, but she used to say it. She lost her seat, you know. And so what all these local guys do is they play both sides. They pretend that to the community that this is all under control when it's not under control. And the community is actually going to them and saying, but you're a representative. You said this, and Fianna Fáil said that and the other. But the penny hasn't dropped that, you know, these guys are the agenda. They will support the agenda, and they are. When you voted for them, you voted for this, and what they're doing is just exercising damage control. But it's tragic to watch it because I'm there at the back of the meeting. I got to speak in the election campaign, but they are not going to give me the microphone because they know I'm going to say something like this. I'll say we opposed the IPS Centre back in 2020 because we knew that the CSO figures for 2017 said that the Irish were going to become a minority in their own country by 2050, and we are exactly on course for that. And the EU, the UN, and our government are all part of the same agenda. So there's no way they're going to let me say that. It only took me less than a minute to say it. But first of all, when I say that in a community parish hall, I'll get three responses, because people have been completely absorbed into the government narrative that if you talk about immigration like that, you're a bad person. And they have an emotional response to the challenge to, one, the local representative that they have an emotional attachment to, and Team Ireland that they also have emotional attachment to. And so they all feel that they're on board with Team Ireland. It's reinforced with the GAA club. It's reinforced with the local school. All the professionals in the town all more or less go along with the same stuff. And to break from that is to betray Team Ireland. So, these guys, the local people are still responding with more or less three different responses. The first one is, how dare you? Second one is, you must be mad. And the third one is, you're a bad person. And they're still there. They're still there because the narrative is so important. That's why RTE got 750 million euros this year, despite the fact that even Team Ireland, all the dopes who go along with the agenda, they know that there's something. I shouldn't call them dopes. I shouldn't. We should say Team Ireland. They suspect there's something. They don't like RTE, even though they absorb and accept all the narratives about Ukraine, about COVID, about all these things, about immigration, about all that stuff. So this is what you've got. You've got, RTE they are starting to lose control, but they're still by and large in control of most of it. People are starting to break. When I first ran for election, I got 200 and something votes. This time I got 600 and something votes. That can change quite quickly. And I think we're there, that rally this weekend, I think we're going to see some changes into the future. But the one thing which does concern me, Josh, about the politics is that a lot of people are uncomfortable with the new characters that are showing up. I think it's by and large a good thing, because Conor McGregor, what he said was true. And, as I said before, we can't do this we can't run these campaigns without money. And it looks like the Americans are going to get involved. Now, there are a lot of people who are going to say, oh, big red flags and all that kind of stuff. But when we were trying to put together try to draw together the people, have a dialogue with the nationalist movement here in Ireland, we found it very, very difficult. The responses were, we got a good response at one level. At least we pulled together an alliance that got the biggest share of the vote, even though we functioned as a party, even though we weren't a given status of a political party. But I would say to people, if you weren't focused on the need for a Irish national, an Irish national political grouping that had its act together, what can we expect except something like this to happen. You know, if we are incapable of getting our act together, why wouldn't something else happen, which would be less under our control? It may not be whatever is happening, whatever's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. Maybe something where there's a big dialogue goes on, and we get a united, we build up trust and confidence between each other, and we get a single purposeful political momentum with a single target for the voters. But what would have to happen for all of that is dialogue, and we haven't had that, and there is a reluctance for that, for whatever reason. I would say when you look at Trump's team, they have a alliance of a coalition of allies that work well together, that have built up trust and confidence with each other. If you look at Nigel Farage in the UK, he doesn't have that. He operates a top-down authority, a kind of authority structure based on almost a personality cult, and that doesn't work well. And I would say that when what Trump's team has done is they've managed to, they have a level of trust and confidence. You don't see Trump bringing in people who nobody trusts and believes, whereas you see Nigel Farage bringing in people that people lack trust and confidence in, because it's a top-down thing. He does what he wants. Now, I would say, I could be wrong because I haven't really got access to what's going on in the Trump team or the Farage team, but that's my perception of it. And I think Ireland needs to learn from that. Top-down structures, personality cults don't work. Dialogue works. And if you want to build up a team of people who can ultimately, what politics is about, politics means the things of the hierarchy. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to replace the hierarchy with different personalities and different policies through the political, through the voting process. And in order to do that, we would need to have a team of people who trust each other, who have trust and confidence. You need expertise to take on a government. If we're serious about running this country, you have to have expertise. You have to develop the trust with all these people. You can't spend your time checking up on them and telling them what to do. They have to know what to do. They have to be capable of doing it and working on their own to a common purpose and vision. And that doesn't happen without talking. And at the moment, there's the dialogue. How long will this take? It'll take as long as it takes for dialogue. And dialogue where people go not just to talk, but to engage and to work out, can we say the same things and develop policy around that? A lot of people are incapable of expressing a national strategy. What are you doing? What are you trying to do? A lot of people, I suspect, don't actually know what they're trying to do. So, we have to be able to have a strategy and a dialogue. There's enough time now because this government is going to run 4 years. But if that process doesn't happen, whatever we do is going to be a mess. So, so that's really it. My perspective on the politics, Josh.
Exactly. Well said as well. So thank you for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. So is there anything else you want to throw in before?
I would say, Josh, and whether this makes sense to you, I was reared in a time when there was some intellectual freedom, where public discussions happened. I mean, a lot of people go back to Gay Byrne on the Late Late Show. He was able to have discussions with people who he didn't agree with. And there's a terrible saying in Ireland that I really don't like, and it's show me your company and I'll show you who you are. And that to me means that if you are in company with someone, you seek their approval and you want to have the same opinion as them. You don't want to disagree with them. But the thing is, we need to be able to have conversations with people, to engage with them without being identified with them or looking for their approval. And what I've found is that so many people, cancel culture has been here for such a long time now, Josh, that people don't know another way of interacting or having dialogue other than cancel culture. And what cancel culture does is, first of all, it takes offense. It finds fault. It elevates the drama of that offense. And then it tries to exclude people and punish them until they come back into line. And, you can't, that is no basis for dialogue. It's a basis for conflict. And it's what we've had, Josh. And one of the problems we have is that our own people behave the same as Antifa behaves. There's a lot of snowflake stuff going on. People take offense. They don't engage with the argument. They do public shaming. And the problem with that, Josh, is I remember your channel was Pro Freedom Josh, and I like that because
I've rebranded it now to Joshua Podcast. I didn't like the whole Pro Freedom Josh name, so I just thought I would change it to something simpler like Joshua Podcast.
I liked it because ultimately we are about. I'm about freedom anyway, and freedom requires us to be able to tolerate people who have a different personal ideology to ourselves. We don't need to indoctrinate others to thinking exactly the same as ourselves. And the problem, Josh, is we all have a personal ideology, which is it's unique to ourselves. I have a personal ideology which I share with no one, So I may have a lot in common with yourself, Josh, and I think I do, but there are going to be things where we disagree. And I think we're then confronted with do I try and get you to say what I say, or do you try and get me to say what you say? And if we can't say the same thing, do we exclude each other and, disassociate from one another? No, we don't. We give each other the freedom to be able to make choices. And that's what God does. He says, don't sin, but we have the freedom to choose whatever we want to do with our lives. And God doesn't take that away from us. And I don't think we should take that away from each other either in terms of an open discussion. It's a fallen world, but and I'll finish by saying this: it is your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's a fallen world. It's a cruel world. It's a corrupt world, and the kingdom of heaven is our home. But we're trying to make as much of this earth feel like the kingdom of heaven. It's an impossible job, but that's why our culture has been inspirational, why the West or Christendom is something that people have a love for all over the world. They recognize something really good in the West. and it's still there, even though we've lost so much of it. But there's hope, and it's still a vision we can work at and have a purpose for our lives and contributing to, Josh.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on again. Sure, we can keep in touch and arrange another podcast again soon
Well,
when you're.
thank you, Josh. I will, of course, and thank you, Josh, for letting me talk so much.
And we had a few listeners too. We had about nearly 10 on Rumble, and I think 1 or 2 on YouTube. But I know it's small, but I think that when I upload it to other platforms, the view count
It
will.
will. I notice we normally get 1 or 2,000 by the end of it. When we used to go on Telegram, which is great.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on, and thank you to everybody who has tuned in. I should be back again in the next week or so. But till then, I will